Hey guys, tonight we're climbing up a narrow wooden ladder, one creaking rung at a time, into the high observatory tower of a Han Dynasty. The air is cool, edged with the scent of plum blossoms and old ink. You duck beneath a beam, step onto a flat rooftop of packed tiles, and there above you is the night sky, stretching wide and velvet blue, pierced by soft constellations. You're in ancient China, and you're about to spend the evening doing something very important and very, very quiet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, post your location and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing how far this sleepy little stargazing community stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You exhale and sit, legs folded beneath your night robes, your back resting against a wooden beam still warm from the day's sun. You've brought everything you need. A worn brush, soot ink, a small lacquer tablet with notches for tracking lunar phases, and tucked inside your robe's inner pocket a cricket. It rustles faintly inside a tiny woven cage, content, settled, and ever so slightly curious. Above you, the stars move like they always do, slowly, with purpose, almost smug in their predictability. The Big Dipper hangs low tonight. The jade well glimmers near the eastern edge of the sky. You tilt your head back, feeling the night seep into your bones like tea into porcelain. You are an astronomer, but not in the modern sense. You're not just mapping constellations. You're watching the mandate of heaven, the celestial pulse that signals everything from the emperor's health to the price of rice. If a star flickers where it shouldn't or disappears entirely, don't just note it. You worry, you write it down carefully so it doesn't keep you awake tomorrow night. Still, the act of simply watching is calming, almost hypnotic. Your eyes drift from one flickering cluster to the next, then down again to the earth below, the lantern-lit city streets, and finally to the cricket nestled in your robe. You check on him. Gently. He chirps. Just once. It's soft, but steady. The sound fades quickly into the night, swallowed by air and distance, but you feel it in your chest like a tiny heartbeat. Why do you carry a cricket? Well, it's tradition. And also you're not sure anymore. Crickets have long been part of the Skywatcher's world. They sing through the night, keeping you company during long observations. Their song becomes part of your rhythm. Their silence warns you of approaching storms. Their patters, you swear, sometimes match the stars themselves. Historians still argue whether crickets served scientific, spiritual, or purely emotional purposes for these ancient observers. Some say it was about harmony, others about luck, others about loneliness. The truth? It's probably all three. You remember the first night you brought one with you, a gift from your teacher. He said, "It'll keep your thoughts from wandering too far." He wasn't wrong. On nights when the sky was clouded, or when the stars moved like stubborn old men, refusing to follow their path, the cricket filled the silence with a kind of focused presence, not demanding, not distracting, just there. It's hard to explain to outsiders. They think of crickets as noise, as pests, or worse, as dinner. But here, in this place, they're guardians of silence. Sound makers, yes, but only to mark the stillness more clearly. The wind shifts, brushing your sleeves. You jot down a few quick strokes on your tablet, 3 bright bodies, near the Oxnard star movement slightly west from last month. Nothing dramatic, but worth noting. You press your finger lightly to the top of the cricket cage. He stirs again, then settles. You wonder if he's watching the stars too. Your eyes grow heavier, not from boredom, but from the gentle insistence of the sky. Its constancy has a way of quieting the mind. You breathe in, count 6 slow beats, then breathe out, imagining your thoughts curling away into the sky like steam from a teacup. The world below sleeps, the heavens above churn slowly, patiently, and you somewhere in between keep your silent watch. Not alone, never quite alone. The night deepens, folding in on itself like silk. You blink slowly, adjust your seat, and shift the lacquer tablet to your lap. Careful not to smudge the last character you inked, North Star. Steady, unwavering. Beside it, a tiny line mark tracks the moon's position, now 3 fingers above the city's ridgeline. The cricket hums again to chirps this time, measured, almost polite. You let the sound wash over you. In the grand dance of the Han court and the ever-grinding mechanisms of the imperial calendar, your job looks simple. Sit on rooftops, track constellations, note patterns, and relay them to officials who wear robes more expensive than your annual ration. But there's far more to it. You are a guardian of order, tasked with sensing disruptions in the heavens before they manifest on Earth. So you watch, and you listen, and for listening, few companions are more helpful or more soothing than a cricket. Tonight, the air is still, the kind of stillness that makes even the stars seem louder. You lean over your side pack, pull out a small ceramic jar, and place it beside you. Inside are a few dried bamboo leaf snacks for your chirping friend. He doesn't eat much, just nibbles here and there, as if he knows his main job is musical, not nutritional. You think back to the first time you heard about the cricket watchers of the southern province. Elderly astronomers who swore that a cricket's tone changed depending on the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn. High-pitched for harmony, one scroll claimed. Low when the sky is ready to misbehave. Historians still debate whether these cricket sky theories had real observational basis, or whether lonely stargazers simply found patterns because they needed to. But in the stillness of nights like this, you start to understand. When the world narrows to starlight, parchment, and chirps, every little sound becomes significant. You recall a time when your own cricket stopped chirping entirely just for one night. No wind, no clouds, no omen scrolls predicting trouble, and yet you felt a pressure behind your eyes, a quiet wrongness. The next day, a minor earthquake rattled the capital. Nothing catastrophic, but strange enough, of course, no one else credited the cricket. But you remember, and now, here you are again, in another quiet vigil, warm robe wrapped around you, stars blinking above, and your insect companion gently warming inside your sleeve. Down below, the city sleeps. Dim lanterns flicker. Temple bells have long gone quiet. But in this observatory, you're very awake. This is your world shaped, not by sun, but by shadow, soot, ink, and cosmic logic. Your tablet holds more than just positions. You draw miniature sky map star glyphs, surrounded by notations in tiny calligraphy. Soft breeze, slight cloud veil, west wind's breath, and, in the margins, always a dot or a stroke for the cricket's song. It may not be standard astronomy, but it is yours. There's a kind of rhythm to it all. Observe, listen, mark. Observe, listen, mark. Sometimes you feel like you're transcribing music, not celestial data. The cricket is your metronome. Tonight, your observations drift toward the Willow Mansion. Part of the 28 lunar mansions used by Han astronomers to track the moon's passage, the willow was said to influence sorrow and mourning, but also art and emotion. Poets liked this one. You wonder if it affects crickets too. Your cricket chirps again, a gentle trill this time. You smile, half-lidded, letting the sound anchor you in the moment. Below, a breeze stirs the lanterns along the palace walls. The smoke from your extinguished oil lamp curls into the sky like a soft question. And still, you wait. Astronomy here is slow. It is not the clamor of European towers and spinning brass ass. It is patient, a conversation between silence and light. You do not conquer the stars, you consult them. You don't chart orbits. You trace relationships between constellations, between moon and monarch, between man and sky. Your cricket shifts again in his pocket cage. You lift it gently and peek inside. He's calm, legs tucked, antennae twitching slightly, like a priest sensing incense in the air. You whisper thanks not because he understands, but because gratitude, like tea or sleep, is more about offering than outcome. Then you set the cage down by your tablet where a song joins your notes. Together, you continue your watch. And up above, the stars blink on, one by one, unhurried and unmoved. The stars have shifted. Not dramatically, just a finger's width here, a sparkle there, but you notice. You always notice. It's part of the job, after all. You pull your sleeve back, careful not to disturb the cricket resting in his pocket cage, and tilt the lacquer tablet to catch the moonlight. You dip your brush into the inkstone, swirling the soot-thick ink into a slow spiral, and mark a single curved stroke for Shin, the heart star center of the sky's ancient pulse. Beside you, the cricket sings again. 3 chirps, then pause. Not unlike a breath, you've come to recognize his patterns, just like the constellations. Not exact, of course. He's no clock. But when you sit for hours under the stars, even the smallest rhythms become part of your landscape. Tonight's air has that still but not empty quality. You can almost hear the edges of things, the scrape of papyrus, the rustle of silk, the sound of soft calluses against wooden railing as another astronomer, somewhere on another tower, leans into their own neck. You stretch your legs, shift slightly, and reach for your pouch. From it, you draw an odd little object, a cricket pot made of dark glazed ceramic, no wider than your palm. It's delicately painted just. A pale moon on one side, and the faint shape of bamboo leaves curling around the lid. Inside, when not being transported in a sleeve or robe fold, your cricket makes his temporary home. Cricket pots were a tradition long before your time. Scholars collected them. Poets gifted them. Courtiers commissioned whole sets painted with constellations or dragon motifs. In some families, passing down a cricket pot was akin to passing down a sword. Get the sword didn't teach chirp at dusk or demand finely cut melon rind for dinner. You open the lid gently and let your companion breathe in the cool night air. He trills once, then again, then settles. His body pulses in rhythm with his sound, a tiny, insistent life, woven into your solitary work. You pause to listen, not just to him, but to everything. Far below, a bell rings once low and distant from the Western Guard Tower. Just a signal, not an alarm, a moment's mark in time. A cricket's chirp in iron. To the east, wind brushes the eaves of the quartz bath, stirring up a faint scent of sandalwood and jasmine from someone's unfinished evening ritual. And up above, the moon now arcs closer to Ghost Wagon, a cluster of stars shaped like a chariot with no driver, always facing the same direction, always silent. You wonder if it's lonely, or just particularly focused. Your notes grow slower, less precise, not because you're tired, but because you're drifting. Your breath follows the tempo of the chirps. Your fingers relax on the brush. Some ancient scrolls refer to this state as the listening trance, the moment when the observer begins to sync with the night, becoming less a watcher and more a part of the watched. It's said that emperors who dreamt under such conditions awoke with divine insight. You mostly wake up with ink on your face and sore knees. But who's keeping track? Historians still debate whether these trances were real or romanticized. But when your only company is sky and song, when your job is to hear not just what is, but what might be changing, then yes, trance is as good a word as any. You blink and find your hand still moving absent-mindedly, copying a curve of stars along the edge of the page. Below it, you sketch a simple line. Then another. Before long, you've drawn your cricket more symbolic than accurate, just a shape of folded legs and music. He sings again. You glance toward the horizon, where the faintest blush of pre-dawn hovers like a rumor. The sky is still deep indigo, but something inside you, something tuned like your cricket, is beginning to shift. It's almost morning, but not yet. For now, there's still time to watch, to wait, to breathe in the quiet ink-slick night, and listen for what else the stars might say, or what your tiny companion might whisper in his sleep. The moon has begun its gentle slide westward, dipping toward the hills that guard the city's edge. Below you, the rooftops lie still, layered like scales, glinting silver in the moonlight. Lanterns burn low, their flicker nearly lost to distance. And you, high above it all, tuck your cloak tighter and reach for your cricket's travel cage. It's nothing grand, just a small hand-woven cylinder made of willow bark, reinforced with thread and patience. The top's capped in carved bone, painted with a pale swirl that once looked like a cloud, though now it resembles more of a sleep-deprived comma. Still, it's sturdy, and your cricket seems to like it. He chirps as you lift him, just once. You interpret it as enthusiasm. You've been carrying this little creature nightly for months now. At first, it was awkward. You feared jostling him, or worse, losing him down the loose fold of your robe. But now, it's muscle memory. One hand for the observation tablet, one hand near the breast pocket. Balance, rhythm, familiarity. That's the key to your job, really. Not just knowing where the stars are, but learning how to walk the same steps, night after night, season after season. Predictability becomes peace, even when the world below is uncertain. And crickets, they thrive in rhythm. In the gentle cadence of quiet spaces, you pause to check your notes. Earlier, you logged the slow progression of the tail of the Azure Dragon constellation. Now it's shifted slightly west, gliding past the eastern wall, what the ancients called the palace gate in the sky. It's subtle, but to you, it's as obvious as a moving shadow in candlelight. This is your routine. And that, tonight, includes feeding the cricket. You reach into a small satchel tucked beside your water flask and withdraw a tiny slip of melon skin, dried and curled at the edge. It crinkles faintly as you hold it up to the cage. The cricket taps the bottom once, then twice, little clicks of interest. Some scholars argue crickets don't actually eat this late. Others believe they remember flavors, even if they don't nibble. You're not sure what the truth is, but the ritual feels right. You remember an old colleague, Master Lin, who swore that crickets who ate melon made more optimistic sounds. He had charts, even tiny graphs with chirp height ratios and moon phase overlays. Most thought him eccentric. You thought him quietly brilliant. Master Lin's cricket once escaped during a solstice reading. He spent the rest of the night tapping bamboo reeds in hopes the sound would lure it back. It did, eventually. Or so he claimed. Could have been a new one, but he never stopped believing it was the same little creature. Historians still argue whether astronomers carried crickets for logic or comfort, but no one denies their presence. Pottery shards, scroll illustrations, even soft carvings on jade measuring rods, you find hints of them everywhere. Not front and center, like punctuation in the margin of celestial observation. Some believe crickets were timing instruments, their chirps acting as gentle metronomes during calculations. Others say they were there to humanize the process, to soften the coldness of stars with the warmth of song. You've never tried to explain it. You don't need to. You just know that without the cricket, the silence feels too complete. Like a painting with no signature. Like a moon with no reflection. Tonight, you nestle him back inside the travel cage, Lay it gently on your scroll pouch and return your gaze to the heavens. Above, Altair begins to rise, gliding upward like a bright fish, surfacing from a sky river. You ink a slow, deliberate mark. Below it, a tiny curve for Vega, chasing behind. Together, they form part of the legend of the cowherd, and the weaver girl, a tale told every seventh night of the seventh moon. You wonder if they ever needed a cricket to guide them. Probably not. But you like to imagine them sitting beneath the stars, her head on his shoulder, a kettle steaming nearby, and a small chirp breaking the silence just enough to remind them they weren't alone. Your cricket shifts again, settles a final chirp almost. Satisfied, you dip your brush again, mark the stars, and feel the corners of your mind begin to soften. The night is still long, but it no longer feels empty. The wind changes, not by much, just a gentle eastward drift, like someone breathing out softly over the edge of the world. It brushes your face, flutters your sleeve, and carries with it the faintest smell of pine ash and distant incense. You shift slightly, pulling your robe closer, and glance over at your cricket's cage. Still quiet, still calm. It's late now, very latent. The stars are steady overhead, like glowing punctuation marks in a language you've spent a lifetime learning to read. But tonight, you're not alone up here. From the far side of the observatory platform comes the rustle of slippers against tile. You turn just enough to see your fellow skywatcher Gian, emerging from the shadowed stairwell. His robe wrapped tightly around his shoulders and his own cricket cage dangling gently from one hand. He doesn't speak, not yet, just nods, then joins you near the edge of the wall. He sets his kettle down beside yours and begins to prepare his own midnight brewa, blend of lotus root, dried tangerine peel. You can smell it before the water boils. It's warm, slightly floral, faintly spicy, a scent that doesn't ask anything of you. It just is. The two of you sit in silence, your crickets softly chirping in their respective cages, his slightly faster, yours slower, like a syncopated duet. You've always joked that your crickets are arguing politely about moon phases. Gian breaks the silence first. "Moon's higher tonight than it was yesterday," he murmurs, almost to himself. You nod. Just a breath off. I logged the difference. There's comfort in this kind of conversation. Sparse, specific, rooted in shared rhythm. You don't need to explain why you're watching or why the crickets are here. You both understand. You've both spent years mapping shadows, tracking eclipses, and listening to stars that say nothing, but say it so clearly. Gian pours you a small cup of his tea. You accept it with a quiet bow of your head. He holds up his Katala slender bronze, one with a tiny etched crane on the side, and says, "I've used this one since Zhanggan. That was 6 winters ago. You know, because that's the same year your old kettle cracked in the frost. You buried it near a mulberry tree outside the academy wall. Some students carved a tiny poem into a scrap of wood and left it there like a tombstone. Still holds heat, you ask?" Gian taps the side. "As long as I do." The two of you sit in silence again, sipping tea, breathing in the cool air, surrounded by crickets and stars. This moment, brief, quiet, entirely unremarkable to anyone else, feels sacred. No ceremony, no banners. Just two astronomers sharing warmth, memory, and a pair of chirping pocket companions. It's easy to forget that this too is astronomy, not the tracking of comets or the calculation of eclipse cycles, but the human part, the connective tissue that makes your job more than ink on parchment. Historians still argue whether these quiet rooftop meetings ever influenced records. But between the official log entries and the diagrams of constellations, there are always scribbled margins. G and S. T helped with the chill tonight. Or Cricket refused to chirp before midnight, perhaps a sign of rain. You glance over at Gion's notes. He's sketching something 3 stars in a curve, labeled with tiny characters. Beside it, a symbol for sound. A stylized spiral with 4 bars. It's the code he uses for double. You've adopted that mark, too. The T finishes. The crickets grow quieter. One tucks its legs beneath its body. The other curls in on itself like a tiny question mark. You each close your notebooks, roll them tightly with practiced hands, and tuck them back into your scroll cases. Gian rises first. Watch the South Star, he says, not as a warning, but as a favor. You nod. It drifted early last week. Might again? He disappears back down the stairs, his silhouette briefly illuminated by the moon. Before it's swallowed by the dark, you're alone again, but not really. Not with the moon still rising, not with the last warmth of lotus ginger still on your tongue. Not with the steady, near-silent pulse of your cricket, curled asleep in its cage, content with the rhythm of the world. You dip your brush once more, draw 3 dots for tonight's stars, and next to them, a curl, 4 lines, double chirp. The sky begins its slow turn toward morning, though it doesn't admit it yet. The stars are still proud, still sharp-edged, and the night wind has not yet picked up the scent of dawn. You stretch slowly, knees cracking like scroll parchment, and glance once more at the tablet resting on your lap. Most of tonight's observations are logged. You've traced the arc of the ox, the slow creep of the toad, and the subtle pulse of the encampment constellation. But tucked in the margin of your notes, scrawled between marks for moon position and wind direction, are tiny annotation strips. Low trillier private language of pocket observations, written for no one but yourself. Tonight, though, your mind drifts not to the sky, but to the stories the ones passed down in low voices, over bowls of congee and kettles of steaming tea. Stories of the emperor's night garden. It was said that the imperial palace, ringed with gold-tipped towers and guarded by men in robes and armor, held a garden so still, so perfectly arranged, that time slowed within its walls. In that garden, only the most trusted stargazers were allowed to record observations, chosen not for political favor, but for the stillness in their hearts. You've never seen this place, but tonight, with the city slumbering and your cricket softly humming, you imagine it. You picture the long paths of carved stone, laid with purpose. Trees grown in careful curves, plum blossoms that fall only when someone is looking, and in the center, a shallow reflecting pooled surface, mirroring the stars more faithfully than ink or parchment ever could. There, in the garden's heart, sat the emperor's chair, a simple stone seat carved from jade, and beside it, always, was a low table with a kettle. Not gilded, not ceremonial, just perfectly used, always warm, always ready. That's what the stories say. Historians still argue whether this garden existed at all. Some claim it was a metaphor, a poetic stand-in for the act of patient observation. Others suggest it was real but hidden, maintained by monks or eunuchs sworn to silence. A few believe it still exists, overgrown, somewhere beyond the forbidden pavilion, waiting for someone quiet enough to rediscover it. You like believing it was real, because you can imagine it too clearly. The soft hiss of boiling water, the distant rustle of silk robes, and the gentle chirp of crickets echoing against stone. As the stars passed overhead like visitors with old secrets, your own camp, by comparison, is modest, a cracked tile roof, a creaky ladder, and a view slightly blocked by a very stubborn cedar tree. But tonight, as the breeze carries the smell of old bamboo and dust from the southern hills, you pretend. You pretend your perch is the emperor's garden. Your kettle rests beside you, still warm, not quite empty. You swirl the last of your tea, watching the liquid curl like starlight in motion. The cricket, sensing something in the air, chirps again, short and content. You tap a new mark on your notes. Garden mood, east wind, second song. You're not entirely sure what it means, but it feels right. And then you hear it, distant, faint, maybe imagined. Another chirp. Not yours, farther away, matching yours in tempo. You hold your breath, one chirp, then another. A pause, then the pattern repeats. It could be coincidence. It could be wind through the reeds. It could be the world answering itself. But in that moment, you allow yourself the story that somewhere in a shadowed pavilion of the palace, another astronomer is also awake, also listening, also steeped in silence with a cricket in his sleeve and a kettle beside him. Two watchers, and for now, that's enough. You smile into your sleeve, whisper a word of thanks to the wind, and dip your brush again, not to note a star, but to write a single, quiet character. Stillness. The stars begin to blur, not because they've changed, but because your eyes are tired, edges softening, shapes losing their grip. You blink slowly, gently, like a bird folding its wings at the end of a long flight. Your cricket stirs in his cage with a light scritch of leg against wood. You reach down and rest your fingers against the side of the pot, just enough for him to know you're still there. This part of the night, just before the first edge of dawn, is the hardest. It's also the quietest, not the sleepy kind of quiet, but the watchful quiet, the kind that wraps around your neck like a scarf and dares you to move too fast. So, you don't. Instead, you pull out your astronomy crate, the one you only open on calm nights when there is no wind to scatter your papers and no surprise visitors from the command post asking for calculations you did. T volunteered to give. It's old, this crate. Dark wood, bound with iron, lid worn smooth by the oils of long fingers and long years. Inside is not treasure, exactly, but it's close. Your compass, still carved with your father's initials. A rolled scroll of lunar tables, a jade paperweight in the shape of a cloud, and your kettle, polished just yesterday for no reason except that you had the time. This is your toolbox of the cosmos, your stargazing suitcase. It holds everything you need to listen to the sky. First, you remove the compass. Simple, balanced, still faintly scented with pine. You set it gently on the stone ledge beside your tablet. Not because you'll need it tonight, but because its presence makes the night feel complete. Then, your calendar scroll hand-copied, with your own notations in the margins. You unroll it halfway, find today's date, and press a dot beside the character for quiet moon. Not for record keeping, really. Just for you. Last, you lift out a cloth, pouch tied with silk cord, and sealed with a wax bead stamped in the shape of a cricket's footprint. Inside, food for your companion, extra bedding for his pot, and a second, smaller cage, one you carved from willow branch and thread during a week of rain so endless you forgot what dry boots felt like. You never used that cage, but you keep it close, a kind of emergency home. A reminder that even when things fall apart, something small and simple and handmade can still hold life. The kettle, for now, stays in the crate trapped in wool, still warm from earlier, radiating the slow heat of stories have. You touch the side of it and imagine the thousands of times it has boiled, hissed, poured, clanked. Historians rarely note these crates. They record the stars observed, the emperors served, the scrolls penned in long columns of ink. But the crate is always there, in the background, like the shelf behind a poet or the inkstone beside a general. This one has been with you since your second year of training, when your mentor gifted it with a single sentence. The sky is cold. Prepare accordingly. You didn't understand it then. You do now. You reach for your brush again, ink long dried on the bristles, and begin sketching the contents of the box. The compass, the scroll, the kettle, the second cage, a quiet inventory, a drawn memory. You label each item, not by name, but by function of feeling. Steadiness, rhythm, warmth, shelter. Your cricket chirps once soft, tentative, like he approves. You smile, because here, under the last sweep of stars, you're not just keeping time. You're building continuity, a thread between last season and this. Between your teacher's watch and your own. Between a cage that holds song and a kettle that once boiled tea under an eclipsed moon. You close the crate gently, not locked, not latched, just closed. The stars are dimmer now, the breeze cooler. You pull your cloak tighter and lean back, and beside you, your tools rest, not grand, not golden, but precise, reliable, everything you need to watch the heavens, and maybe, if you're lucky, to sleep beneath them. The sun has started its slow descent behind the hills, turning the camp golden and sleepy. Shadows lengthen, conversations drift lazily through the warm air, and you begin to hear the gentle clatter of evening preparation. Armor being stacked, boots being unlaced, kettles returning to the fire for round 2. And tonight, you're in luck. You've been asked no, invited to join the inner circle of the officer's tent for an evening brew. Which means one thing. You're about to witness what Emperor Justinian II liked to sip before battle. Not literally, of course. The emperor isn't here, he's been gone for a couple centuries. Exiled once, returned with a vengeance, and eventually lost his throne again in a political saga so twisty it makes kettle steam look like a straight line. But his habits, his routines, oh, those linger. Especially among commanders who want to appear both well-read and well-rested. You duck into the canvas flap of the command tent and are immediately hit by the scent of clove, honey, and something vaguely citrus. The air is thicker here, filled with the warmth of slow-boiled herbs and quiet authority. The captain broad-shouldered, frowning as usual, gestures for you to sit. He's holding a kettle that's been polished so thoroughly it practically glows. A far cry from your dented field pot. This one has handles shaped like lion heads and a spout that curves like a serpent. It might have opinions. Justinian's brew, he mutters, pouring a thin stream into a ceramic cup. Chamomile, orange peel, 2 peppercorns, 1 bay leaf. You blink. That's oddly specific. Historians still argue whether this exact blend was truly just, or whether it was concocted by later generals hoping to conjure a bit of imperial focus through flavor. Either way, the recipe is passed down like a family heirloom, sipped slowly before big decisions. Late-night map discussions, or whenever insomnia and military bureaucracy collide. The taste is earthy, slightly bitter, but layered. You feel smarter just holding the cup, or maybe that's the bay leaf talking. In Justinian's time, hot drinks were already a part of court life, though not always tea as we know it today. Byzantines sipped infusions, boiled herbs, spiced broths, even watered-down wine heated gently with cinnamon and nutmeg. The wealthy had dedicated servants who managed their thermal drinks. One empress was rumored to travel with 4 kettles, one for bathing, one for medicine, one for wine, and one solely for steeping fennel. You take another sip. The captain is now reading from a parchment, but no one's really listening. They're all in the same sleepy haze, brought on by long hours, full bellies, and the hypnotic swirls of kettle steam. One soldier dozes with his cup still in hand, head nodding like a slow metronome. Across the tent, a junior officer is tending the command kettle like it's a sacred relic. He adjusts the flame, stirs occasionally, and mutters something about infusion timing. You admire the dedication. You also wonder how long before he's reassigned to latrine duty for overstepping a bay leaf. The tradition goes deeper than taste. Many believed that Justinian's blend brought clarity before chaos, a moment of stillness before the horns blew. The dust rose, and orders turned into noise. The captain finally speaks. Sip. Don't gulp. Don't burn your tongue. We need those for shouting tomorrow. You nod. It's all very serious, very ceremonial, but beneath the stern faces and crisp uniforms, you sense something else. Comfort. A kind of shared humanity, boiled and poured into a dozen mismatched cups. Outside, the campfire songs begin soft, off-key, often about sheep. You hear the gentle clang of cookware being cleaned, the last kettles of the night returning to the fire, their owners waiting for just one more round of warmth before crawling into itchy woolen blankets. And here, in the officer's circle, you raise your cup one last time. To Justinian. To bay leaves and the myths they brew. Darkness rolls in, gently, wrapping the camp like a woolen cloak that smells faintly of wood smoke and laundry someone forgot to finish. The fires burn lower now, just flickers and glows. You wander back toward your own tent, the air carrying faint scents of ash, sweat, and simmering mint. Somewhere behind you, a soldier is humming. Another is snoring. You can't tell who. They've all begun to blur together in the haze of evening fatigue. But as you round the fire pit for your squad, you see them. 3 men, huddled close to a low-burning flame, kettle perched proudly in the center like a miniature cauldron of dreams. This is the nightly kettle vigil. No one calls it that aloud, of course. Too dramatic. Too poetic. But it's what it feels like. A shared moment of wordless presence, where nobody's really doing anything, and nobody has to. The kettle does all the talking. It bubbles. It steams. Occasionally, it lets out a gentle hiss like a sleeping dragon clearing its throat. You join them without speaking, settling onto a folded cloak. Someone nudges a cup toward you, lukewarm, half full, infused with something vaguely floral. You nod in thanks. You sip. This is the quietest part of camp life, and the one you've come to treasure most. Byzantine soldiers didn't sleep as they weren't supposed to. Light sleepers made good sentries. But before that shallow slumber came this ritual. Fire, steam, the sound of boiling, the flickering silhouettes of elbows on knees. Nothing, just rest. Tonight, someone's brought dried herbs from home-wild thyme and spearmint, picked by his sister and sent with a note tucked into a sock. He crumbles them between his fingers and drops them into the kettle. The scent is sharp, green, soothing. It reminds you of hills, or maybe just the idea of hills. One soldier stirring with the back end of a dagger. Another scratches a song into the dirt with a stick. No one says much. They don't need to. In these late-night moments, stories sometimes suffice unprompted, half-whispered, shaped more by the kettle's rhythm than any need to impress. Someone tells a tale of a kettle that saved a scout's life, its polished belly reflecting moonlight just long enough to warn him of a waiting arrow. Another swears his father's old unit boiled wine with rosemary and said it kept ghosts away. Another just chuckles and mutters, ghosts prefer colder drinks anyway. Historians still argue whether these evening customs counted as official sleep hygiene or were just the natural byproduct of tired men in cold places doing their best to feel human. Whatever the explanation, the routine worked. You stare into the kettle, now watching the water swirl as bubbles rise, twist, vanish. The metal reflects the firelight, creating tiny galaxies of orange and gold on its battered sides. One soldier leans in, barely above a whisper. If you look long enough into the boil, you'll see tomorrow. You try. You see bubbles. Hard to say no one laughs, though. Not out loud. You pass the cup back. Another fills it again. The circle continues. In some parts of the empire, especially among the border garrisons, it was common to place small tokens in the kettle during night boil spebbles, fruit rinds, things that represented people left behind or hopes not yet spoken aloud. It was symbolic, of course, but soldiers being soldiers, it wasn't long before the kettle became something more, a vessel of memory. You reach into your pouch, pull out a small button, round, plain, slightly cracked. It came off your old tunic during a river crossing 2 weeks ago. It's useless now. Or maybe not. You drop it into the kettle. It sinks slowly, vanishes under the surface. No one says anything, but one man nods. Another sips. The fire crackles. You begin to feel your shoulders sink just a little. The ache in your knees dulls. The air, cool and steady, starts to settle on your eyelids. The water boils gently. The button turns circles at the bottom, and above it all, steam rises quiet, consistent, comforting like a lullaby with no lyrics. The night deepens, thick and velvet black, speckled with stars and the faint flicker of distant torch. The camp has fallen quiet, real quiet now, nah. Just sleepy silence. But that special kind of stillness that arrives only after full bellies, warm hands, and stories softly told. But there's one last thing to hear tonight. The clang of kettles before the march. You almost don't notice it at first. It begins with a single rhythm too. Clinks, pause, one sharp tap, a cooking spoon against a lid. Then another joins in, then 2 more. The fire circle becomes a percussion section, light and irregular, like a blacksmith having a dream about music. You don't know who started it. No one ever does. But this has become a small ritual in your company. Soldiers using their kettles, not just for tea, but for tempo. A way to signal readiness, unity, or just release a little nervous energy before the next day's march. It's soft, it's silly, and it's become as regular as oiling boots or complaining about blisters. You pick up your own kettle and give it a gentle rap with your spoon. It sings back with a flat, mellow ring. You tap again slightly, higher up the curve. The sound changes. It's almost musical, if you squint with your ears. A rhythm forms. The tall soldier from Thrace starts drumming the base of his kettle with 2 sticks. Someone else answers with the dull thunk of a ladle. Another scrapes the lid in slow, hypnotic circles. It becomes a language. Tap, pause, tap, scrape, scrape, clink. Then silence. Then, all at once, like crickets responding to a distant call, another group joins in from the eastern quarter of the camp. Soon the air is alive with soft metallic conversation kettle symphonies, if you will. Not composed, not rehearsed, but completely intentional in its randomness. Soldiers aren't drumming just for fun. They re-speaking in the only voice they can afford to use. One that docent tea, wake the whole camp, but still says, "We're still here. We're still ready." Historians still argue whether this kind of musical improvisation had formal meaning, whether it was a code, a morale tactic, or just a coping mechanism. There are reports of similar clang rituals among mercenary units, especially in long encampments where boredom threatened to do what swords could not. You remember an old sergeant who claimed his unit once marched in time to a rhythm tapped out on mess tins. "Kept us together," he said, "even when we hated each other." Tonight, no one seems to hate anyone. The rhythms ebb and flow, louder, then quieter, sometimes playful, sometimes solemn. One kettle makes a high, crisp ping, almost like a bell. Another thuds low and hollow, like a heartbeat underwater. A few of the younger soldiers try to build actual songs. It works, briefly, until someone drops a lid into the fire and spends the next 5 minutes trying to fish it out with a stick and a prayer. You just sit back, cup in hand, and listen. The music settles you in a strange, unexpected way. It's not peaceful in the usual sense. It's not soft harp music or wind through pine needles. It's messy, metallic, flawed, but it's real. There is comfort in the shared sound of usefulness, each note ringing from something that boiled tea, heated stew, or caught rainwater during a storm. These aren't delicate instruments. They're dented, sooty, seasoned by fire and argument and a dozen forgotten recipes. And yet, here they are, singing. You think back to a moment weeks ago, in a camp by a ravine, where your squad spent hours in silence, morale low, food, sleep thin as paper. Then one soldier started drumming the side of his kettle, not to make music, but just to stay awake. The next joined in. Within minutes, the gloom had cracked like a soft-boiled egg. Not chatter, just cracked enough for the steam to rise. You snap back to the present as the rhythm fades. The final tap rings out, and the camp settles again into hush. Someone coughs. A kettle lid squeaks shut. The last sparks from the fire drift upward like tiny burning seeds. You tighten your cloak and glance at your own kettle, silent now, but still warm, still waiting. Tomorrow's march will be long, muddy, probably. The kind where sandals lose their will to live. But tonight, you've tapped a rhythm into the darkness and been answered. And somehow, that's enough. The first golden rays of morning stretch lazily over the edge of the courtyard wall, touching the stone tiles with a light that feels less like illumination and more like a gentle nudge. It spills across the moss-lined bricks, warms the brazier's rim, and casts a soft halo around your kettle, which now sits, empty but dignified, beside your folded scrolls. You watch as the others go about their morning routines. One man folds his robe precisely 4 times before placing it in his pack. Another polishes the brass ring on his compass until it shines like a second sun. An older woman wipes down her observation lens with a cloth that once belonged to her. Teach her a cloth so threadbare it now resembles a whisper. They're all stirring now. Soft chirps rise from sleeves and pouches. The courtyard sounds like a garden slowly remembering it's alive. Each song is different, some long and melodic, others brief and rhythmic. You could almost mistake it for wind in reeds, or the soft click of pebbles in a stream. But no, it's them, your companions of the night resuming their roles as keepers of the inn. You open your own cage and peek inside. He's alert now, antennae up, eyes gleaming with whatever passes for thought in his tiny world. You give him a sliver of dried melon skin from the pouch in your satchel. He pulls it in with a calm urgency, like a scholar finding a long-missing footnote. This part of the day has no official title. It's not yet work. It's not quite rest. It's simply the pause before the next breath. A moment for resetting the rhythm. You rise, kettle in hand, and carry it to the shallow basin near the south gate. There you begin the familiar process. A soft rub of damp cloth, a circular motion with a bit of fine sand to remove the last traces of soot, a rinse from the jug that sits always just beneath the table. The water is cool. Your fingers sting for a moment, then adjust. The kettle, now bare and gleaming, reflects the sky no longer filled with stars, but washed in the kind of soft blue that makes you forget what shadows feel like. You dry it slowly, with a cloth that smells of rosemary and sun. The handle squeaks faintly, like it, too, is stretching after a long night. You wonder how many times this kettle has boiled, how many nights it's sung, how many rooftop stories it's absorbed without ever uttering a word. If it remembers steam, if it remembers silence, if it recognizes you, you tuck it back into your crate, resting it between the compass and the sealed scrolls. Then you tie the lid gently, using the knotted twine that frayed 3 summers ago. but still holds on out of loyalty. The assistant from last night appears again, a fresh scroll under one arm and a look of cautious excitement on his face. "The chief scribe wants our night reports early," he says, breathless. You nod. "Of course he does. Did your cricket behave?" you ask. He grins. "He kept me awake." You raise your brow. "That's the job." As he trots off, scroll bouncing with each step, you pause to take in the full courtyard, no longer hidden in shadow, but now bright, humming softly with life, movement, and the familiar orchestra of waking crickets. This moment will not be recorded, not in the ledgers, not in the imperial annals. It will vanish in the churn of duty and midday heat. But you mark it quietly inside. A kettle cleaned, a scroll completed, a cricket fed, and a sky watch not conquered, not catalogued, just witnessed. Historians still argue about the methods used in ancient observatories. They write essays on star cycles, on calendar reform, on eclipse prediction models, but they never mention this. The feeling of steam on your hands as the sun rises, the echo of a chirp just before sleep, the way an old kettle holds warmth long after it's empty. You return to your bench and sit, not to work, not to wait, but to let the moment stretch just a little longer. Your cricket doesn't sing. He doesn't need to. He's already said enough. The sun has now fully claimed the sky. Not with fanfare, not with brilliance, just steady, sure illumination. Shadows withdraw. Lanterns are extinguished. The glimmering residue of the night evaporates into blue. You sit beneath the awning in the north corridor, scroll case beside you, kettle packed, cricket resting in the curve of your folded sleeve like a forgotten note from an old poem. Your body is still tired, but not the aching kind, more like something that's been like a page filled exactly to its final margin. Across the courtyard, you hear the rustle of fresh rice paper, the scrape of brushes being cleaned, the occasional sniff from someone who spent too long leaning over their ink. The observatory is officially awake. There's always a shift in tone after the night watch changes over. The voices get louder, the movements more purposeful, but still, there's a hush hanging in the corners. As if the building itself knows that the quiet work of the stars deserves a soft goodbye before the sun takes over. You spot Gian, again your companion from the midnight tea. He sits now with two junior scribes, demonstrating how to properly roll a chart without smudging the ink. His kettle rests nearby, still faintly marked with soot around the base, even after he's wiped it down. You realize, watching him, that the kettle never truly becomes clean. No matter how carefully you scrub, no matter how soft the cloth, how fragrant the soap root, it always keeps a bit of the night with it. A little shadow in the metal, a memory baked into the bronze. Yours too is like that. Years of fire, dozens of crickets, hundreds of stews brewed under sky maps and comet tails. Some say a kettle's usefulness is in the heat it holds. But you know its real worth lies in the quiet it creates, the way it draws people near. The way it gives you something to do with your hands while your thoughts drift to the moon S-arc or the slight hesitance in Vega S-ride. You think about the last boil of the bell tower, a tale told by older stargazers, half joke, supposedly long ago. An observatory not unlike yours was shut down during a change in dynasties. Politics, budgets, who can say? The instruments were packed, scrolls archived, duties reassigned, but one man stayed behind. They say he lit a small fire in the tower's highest chamber and brewed one final pot of tea before locking the door. He left no record, no formal goodbye, just a clean kettle on a cold brazier and a folded note beside it that read, "Everything noted, no further disturbances." Historians still argue whether he ever existed. or if the story was just a way to explain why so many observatories echo more than they should. You run a thumb along the lip of your own kettle. There's a small nick there, barely noticeable. It happened the night of the thunder eclipse when the sky went dark in the wrong direction, and half the city lit incense, thinking the world was ending. You remember that night. You remember the kettle tipping slightly, catching the edge of your sandal, sending hot water into your lap and ink across your tablet. You cursed loudly. The cricket chirped an alarm, but by the end of it, you still made your notes. You still caught the tail of the moon as it blinked back into view. It wasn't graceful, but it was exact. You stand, finally, brushing dust from your knees. The courtyard has filled with the scent of porridge now. Someone somewhere layering ginger and garlic in a way that makes your stomach quietly applaud. You're not on the morning roster, which means you can slip away for a few hours. Return your crate to the archive room, rinse out the ink dish. Maybe sneak a nap under the vermilion pines, where the calligraphy apprentices sometimes sleep. Your cricky chirps twice, soft but steady. You glance at him, nodding. I know, you murmur. We'll rest soon. And as you step into the passage leading to the record hall, you pass another observer just arriving. Their kettle still cold, their robe freshly pressed, their cricket silent, not from tiredness, but from anticipation. You exchange nods. No words. Just a flicker of understanding. You have finished your song. Theirs is just beginning.